if you're yelling at the screen and calling me out of my name and your energy is out of alignment with who I aspire to be, then I'm only going to give you probably maybe 5 minutes. So if you start the video off loud, yelling, and especially with your energy towards women as a woman, and it's all pointing and blaming and ridiculing and criticizing as a woman without giving any righteous context, any spiritual context, any emotional context, you're only gonna get so much of my time. But I did see the videos. I watch this stuff, a lot of this stuff, I just watch it and it, you know what I mean? It just, whatever. So about a day after I received the video, a young sister who I hope is watching right now, let me see if her name pops up. She sent me a message on Instagram. She was asking me about what I thought about this particular video, right? She said, hey, I just wanted to know your opinion of this because you are a leading woman in the so-called woke community. I understand her point, but yet speaking from the point of view as a woman who was in a abusive relationship and was young and submissive to a boy that I so thought was a man, and finally got fed up and spoke up and basically cried out for help to family and friends. Was this wrong? And she sent me this message probably a few weeks ago. Please pardon me, sis, if you're not watching. I didn't respond. I get a lot of messages, so sometimes I don't respond, but I do make a mental note, right? So this is important. And when she said it, I was like, I got to address this because I don't know what it is about our community. And, she said the so-called woke. Some people say the so-called conscious. I think it's partially the conscious community, but I think it's a broader scope of the Black community in particular. So I don't really, it's kind of funny to me how the conscious community kind of gets blamed for a lot of the stuff that is naturally a part of our culture, a part of our community. If you look at the churches and the mosques, you can see even the Pan-African community, the intellectual community, right? All these different sections of our culture, you can see the 85%, 10%, 5% mindset reflected in every culture. So, and I'm going to talk about this in the science as a weapon, this idea now that people make mockery of consciousness and being woke, and now everything's geared towards the conscious community, the mistakes, the issues. Like, first of all, the idea of consciousness having any sort of negative connotation is retarded, number one. Secondly, when you start taking words like peace, just saying peace to somebody, or hotep, you know what I mean? People use hotep to make mockery now of people that are so-called part of the so-called consciousness. Well, that word has a lineage, you know what I mean? And the frequency that's tied to that word has a lineage that connects back to when we were operating on the planet as gods. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't know, for a nigga to disrespect the word hotep in the name of making mockery of consciousness, I just find that kind of absurd. And when I say nigga, I am specifically talking about a state of consciousness. I'm not talking about Black people. I'm talking about a state of consciousness, because now white people are making mockery of that type of language too. But so I just wanted to say that, and I'm going to really kind of reinforce that in Science as a Weapon, because whatever you might think of the conscious community, and I am in a place now where I am, my platform and my messages are spiritually based. So I'm focused on metaphysics, not racial injustice, politics, and all of that. Those things are important when you're in a certain state of consciousness. My consciousness now is more privy to spirituality and metaphysics. I just find it funny that people somehow make mockery of consciousness and the conscious community, good, bad, or ugly, and what it has produced. The question for you is, what have you produced? You know what I'm saying? Like, what has the community outside of the conscious community produced to move the culture forward? And I'm not talking about what kind of degree you have or what school you went to or what you wrote your dissertation on, unless you published your dissertation and it helped people to have a different level of awareness and consciousness within themselves. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to say that. There seems to be a playbook, maybe. I'll try to find an easy way to say this. There seems to be a playbook or a template within our community where our men in particular, it's not just our men, but our men in particular, they start off talking about consciousness, talking about, you know, the importance of having an African or indigenous name, you know, rocking your natural hair. You know, then there's a graduation, and then you start talking about kings and queens and herbs and eat to live, and you know what I mean? Then you graduate a little bit, then you start talking about maybe alkaline and, you know, alkaline versus acidity, and you know what I mean? The gods and the goddesses of Africa, of Kemet, you know. Then there's this thing that happens where the graduation starts to include this conversation about submission by way of women. And then it eventually kind of like, it pivots a little bit, and then it's, you know, starts talking about polygamy. You know what I'm saying? And why you go from submission to polygamy. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's this thing that happens, and I don't know how much of it is that's ego, that's arrogance. You start feeling yourself. You know, you used to have 2 females in your DM, now you got 200. You know what I'm saying? So now somewhere in the process of your evolution, you've decided that it's important for us as a culture to start discussing submission and to start discussing polygamy. And I see it. It's like this thing that happens. There's this escalation, right? Which is funny to me. And I'm really curious, you know what I mean, about why that is, because if you really are evolving, not in word, not in just what you talk about on social media, what you do in your YouTube videos or what you post online, but if the more you evolve and grow, the less you talk about other people and the responsibility to the other players in your life and in your world, and start focusing within. And I have said this before, and I will continue to say this: the only way that a man can control a woman is by controlling himself. So if the only way that a man can control a woman is by controlling himself, perhaps the first line of defense should be stop trying to control women in the first place. I keep hearing people talk about the code, we on code, we off code. Well, can we create a code in our culture, in America and Africa and places where indigenous and Black and African people dwell? Can we start a code and a conversation to start cultivating and elevating our sons and our men so that they stop trying to control women and start focusing on controlling themselves? That's my first request. The second thing is, and I say this with all due respect as a mother of a 17-year-old son, right? I feel like that gives me a little bit more, you know what I'm saying? I have a little bit more leniency, a little bit more rope, you know what I'm saying, with how I discuss these matters as a mother to a son, right? With all due respect, we as a culture are not producing enough quality men to keep having this conversation about submission. Now, I didn't say that we don't have quality men in our community. I didn't say that I don't love Black men or that Black men are trash or that and this, I'm talking about Black people, but I'm talking about this male-female dichotomy in general. I didn't say that a woman shouldn't submit to a man. I didn't say that all of our men are no good. I know well-to-do, upstanding, successful, righteous, worthy, beautiful, intelligent, conscious, masculine men. I personally, not just online, I personally know men like this, right? So I want to make sure that I contextualize what I'm saying. But as a culture, when you look at the dichotomy of the male-female relationship right now, when you look at the statistics of single-parent households, when you look at the statistics of, thank you, my sister, for the Cash App. When you look at these statistics of women that have been sexually abused, mentally abused, emotionally abused, when you look at the statistics of women that have not had righteous father figure relationships with any man, not just their father, but with men in general. When you look at the nature of the white male, Black male dichotomy, when you look at the condition of our planet, when you look at the condition of Africa, when you look at the condition of our spiritual and mental and emotional and financial and cultural dichotomy in the world, with all due respect, I just think it's really, 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 really premature for us to keep having this conversation about submission as it pertains to the female-male dichotomy. The conversation is very one-sided, which is ironic to me because submission is a part of life. We're all in submission. Right now, we're all in submission, right? And you don't find God sitting around lurking in corners telling you, or the sun peeking around the corner reinforcing that you need to submit to it. No, you get sun or you get sick. You drink water or you die. You breathe fresh, clean air on a continual basis or your body starts to devolve. You eat good, clean, healthy food or your body reacts. There's no need for this ongoing emphasis and projection on women, on girls about submission. With all due respect, y'all know I come from, the lineage of my thought, right? The schools of thought that I have studied, from the Nation of Gods and Earth to the Nation of Islam to Orthodox Islam to Sufism to Orthodox Christianity to Buddhism. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've been looking for God through all of these different schools of thought and ideologies, religions, spiritual concepts, etc. And I found God in all of them. I've also found the devil in all of them. You know what I'm saying? That 85-10-5 is real. But I've really, especially as of late, been really trying to understand where this concept of this being the role of the woman to submit to a man, among other things, obviously. Now, don't get in your feelings, because I'm going to contextualize this. I'm going to bring this full circle, right? But I think it's time for us as a people to grow up. I think it's time for us as a people to start maturing about how we handle one another in our language, in our conversation when it comes to the male-female dichotomy. Now, I remember I was having a conversation with a very popular brother a few years back. And this was at the time when, I was a lot more fiery online, you know what I mean? And I was much more adept to just saying what I was thinking and letting the chips fall where they may. And I made a post on my social media pages about something that was relevant at the time. It was something dealing with some really popular people, blah, blah, blah. I won't get into that. But during the conversation, me and this brother were having, we started talking about this idea of submission. And he was like, Zaza, you're a scientist. You're a this, you're a that. Like, I respect your mind. I respect your this. I respect your that. But when it all boils down to it, if we were married, if I come home, I should have a plate on the table. If the police are at our door or the white man is coming to assume a position of authority in our household, I should be able to tell you or tell my children A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and there's no kickback, there's no pushback. We all move on one accord. If I feel like the generator in the basement, and I'm recanting this conversation that we had, so y'all bear with me. He was talking about the physical maintenance that men are particular to in this life, right? He mentioned taking out the garbage and, stuff like that. Like, a man wants to do the things that a man is supposed to do. A man has a certain idea, depending on the man, on, the domestication of the household, washing dishes, mopping floors, cleaning, fine. None of that stuff, to me, equates, or I didn't take any issue with anything he said. Hell yeah, I want you to answer the door and deal with, I don't want to deal with that shit. You know what I'm saying? Yes, I want you to take the trash out. Yes, I want you to get my oil changed on my car. Yes, I want you to fix the tires. Yes, I want you to make sure that there's no asbestos in the paint. Mm-hmm. Yes, I want you to, if my son has an altercation or interaction somewhere in the community and it's with another man or something that may take some force. Yes, I want you to make sure the children are trained. Yes, I want you to make sure that the grass is pruned. Make sure that you represent an authoritative position and energy and consciousness in the world. Absolutely. 100%. And I support and praise and appreciate all of the men that operate from that perspective. I think what a lot of, and this is just my perspective, right? So I've talked to a lot of men over the years. I've had a lot of, a study of the psychology of men, particularly Black men, right? You basically want to be able to stand on your square in life, right? You don't want to come in the house and have no argumentative woman in your ear telling you who you are, telling you who you aren't, cussing you out, disrespecting you. Got it. You want a certain level of peace, a certain level of harmony, a certain level of cleanliness. Some of y'all. You want to know that you are the king of your castle. Got it. But guess what? I don't want to come in the house and have to deal with your irritations or frustrations because of what you're dealing with the world in a way that is unpeaceful to me. I want to come in the house and I want to see cleanliness. Not that I'm expecting you to wash dishes or clean the dishwasher or any of that, but you should be just as clean as I am. You should, like cooking, domestication. It even makes me feel some type of way even saying this, because to be honest, I don't care about that type of stuff. I clean, I cook, like all that type of stuff is automatically off top for me, whether I'm in a relationship or not. So for me to even talk about this kind of stuff is kind of rudimentary, but I want us to look at the scope of how we assess the male-female dichotomy. And particularly what's so funny, and I'm going to get into this when I talk about science as a weapon, right? With everything that's going on in the world, these mothers have such a high level of technology, such a high level of frequency-based weaponry of, like the things that the scientists of this world are doing are mind-blowing and quite fascinating if I have to be honest about it. And I don't see from our community perspective, and I'm talking about the global community of the African diaspora or original indigenous people, whatever your preference of language is, right? We are so far beneath in terms of focus, energy, technology, intention, that when I see this conversation about submission happening and, when the flag of polygamy is being waved under the guise of this is the next step of our evolution, it's preposterous to me.